Adrian Finnegan. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, mudslinging, foam flinging and eating humble pie.
I would just like to say one sentence. This is the most humble day of my life.
Rupert Murdoch under attack in more ways than one. His media empire threatened like never before, and many others pay the price of scandal too. Ringing up record numbers, the world's appetite for Apple has put the tech giant on course to become the biggest company on the planet.
Landing here down and locked.
And America's iconic flying machine retires to a museum. So what price now for NASA to put Americans into space? So, is it the end of empire for old-style media mogul Rupert Murdoch because of his cosy relationship with politicians and the police? And is one of the most influential and richest people on the planet about to be run out of town? What began as a tabloid scandal over phone hacking in the UK is now infecting his newspapers, TV stations, and other business interests worldwide. The costs are already enormous. Billions of dollars wiped off the value of his news corporation. Resignations from Britain's top policeman and his deputy. British government stability under threat. Prime Minister David Cameron struggling to justify why he employed a former News of the World editor who's implicated in the hacking scandal. Another former editor has been arrested. A News Corp's boss resigns in the United States, which is where the FBI is investigating whether the phones of 9/11 families were hacked. Well, Britain's oldest newspaper has been shut down, hundreds made redundant. Up to 4,000 rich and not so famous people may have been spied on by News of the World journalists. As he made an unprecedented appearance before a committee of British MPs, Rupert Murdoch insisted that others were to blame.
This is the most humble day of my life.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Murdoch, do you accept that ultimately you are responsible for this whole fiasco?
No.
You're not responsible. Who is responsible?
The people that I trusted to run it, and then maybe the people they trusted.
Well, then the hearing descended into farce when Murdoch was attacked by a man flinging a foam pie. Murdoch's wife, Wendy, hurled herself at the assailant, who was then led away by police, who are left to explain a shocking lapse in security. So this story, it seems, has everything. But has the Murdoch spell been broken? Let's get the thoughts now of PR and crisis management specialist Kevin Craig. He's managing director of the Political Lobbying and Media Relations Company in London. Kevin, this foam pie incident, it was a gift to the Murdochs, wasn't it?
It was a total gift. It was Christmas come early for Rupert and James Murdoch, actually, because I think there was a very deliberate attempt at the Select Committee inquiry for Mr. Rupert Murdoch to portray himself as above the fray, as the distant CEO and chair who wasn't aware of any of the day-to-day detail. And at times he took a long time to answer his questions. He appeared a little bit slow, almost at times forgetful, and it seemed like there was an attempt, whether deliberate or just fortunate, to portray him in a way that would elicit sympathy. And of course then this stupid rogue demonstrator came in and did a favour for the very people I presume he is against.
Yeah, it's ironic, isn't it, that a slapstick moment, which the Murdoch's tabloid newspapers would love, of course, to put into print, actually ends up overshadowing perhaps the crimes that News Corp is being accused of. You say that he was trying to portray a certain image then. I am assuming that you think the Murdochs had PR advice, they'd been coached for their appearance.
Yes, I mean it's a big industry globally, and I know for a fact as MD of PLMR that there was a significant amount of training provided to the Murdochs in advance of the Select Committee hearing this week, and you could tell they started the proceedings. They wanted to make their statement, which the chairman did not allow. But then afterwards, certain lines kept being repeated, and the message of the day, they did successfully get communicated. Mr. Murdoch and the word humble. How often over the decades have any of us, whether in the West or the Arab world, ever heard Rupert Murdoch talking about being humble? He started off, "This is the most humble day of my life," and that was a very prepared, pre-prepared, coached and trained statement.
Did they win the PR battle on the day?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because the bigger question which remains still is that it is now a fact of record for the world to see and hear that, in the words of James Murdoch, bad things happened inside News International. Phone messages were illegally intercepted. Yet this week's Select Committee appearance does not change that fact, which is going to be investigated in law. But the Select Committee appearance by the Murdochs did not make things worse, and that is relative success. I think there is a cost to the overall Murdoch image, which is down to the fact, the core fact at the heart of this whole global circus, if you like, which is that their appearances in front of the Select Committee in Britain this week confirmed that the British police have material which I believe indicates who within News International knew about the illegal interception of voicemails, when they knew, and how far up the management chain that went. None of that is good for the overall reputation of those organisations or the Murdochs. And so there has been damage.
News Corp shares went up after their appearance, but did Rupert Murdoch's refusal to take responsibility undermine in any way his credibility as chairman and CEO?
Well, I think it did undermine it, because those of us across the world following the proceedings who know that corporate governance is important will feel generally that he was not sufficiently on top of the detail, given that he has ultimate responsibility for that. But I think, as I said, these appearances did not make things worse this week, and that's why, in part, shares rallied afterwards. And I think we may have seen the first phase of the transition from father to son this week, because James Murdoch was very competent, and I think we may have seen the start of a slow transition process. And I think because there were no massive errors, it does end up as a success, and that in part is why shares rallied, even though the problem has not gone away.
Okay, let's just remind ourselves of how big the Murdoch's empire is. It's second only to Walt Disney. There are more than 270 Murdoch-owned TV stations, newspapers and media arms worldwide. 20th Century Fox is one of 10 film companies inside the News Corp family. Making movies is a large part of the business. So are TV networks, including Fox in the US, Sky in the UK, and very soon, Sky News Arabia. TV brings in some $15 billion in revenue. Then there's his stable of newspapers, of course, including the influential Wall Street Journal and The Sun and The Times in Britain. They add another $6 billion to the bottom line. There's also a range of offshoots in book publishing, digital media, and other assets. Add all that up, and News Corp has a turnover of more than $32 billion. So all that's now endangered because of the threat of more damaging revelations to come, huge compensation payouts and executives facing jail. A major damage limitation exercise is underway. Let's get back to crisis management and PR specialist Kevin Craig. Globally, Kevin, just how damaged is the Murdoch's image and reputation?
I think globally there is a huge problem which is only just beginning, which is the fact that investigations in every jurisdiction in which News International and News Corp operates they've either started or they may well start in the near future. And it's a big global problem about trust, because the facts are that within these businesses in the British sphere, very serious things are now confirmed to have happened. And that's not good for global brands and global trust building and reputation. So I think whilst the select committees this week did not make the problem worse, there were no massive moments of drama, and while the protester who actually helped the Murdochs, the bigger problems have not gone away, and they will not go away because there are judicial and due processes that now have to take their course.
And of course, trust, a very big issue here in the Middle East, of course. Murdoch has ambitions here with Sky News Arabia in Abu Dhabi. The Arab world isn't going to be impressed, is it?
No, I don't think the Arab world will be impressed at all with what's happened. I've been very fortunate to travel across a number of countries in the Middle East, and in my dealings there with business and government, trust has always been a massive factor. And I think that the next phase of the expansion of Sky in the Middle East, it's going to have to now work even harder, because people will simply not be impressed by the basic facts that within businesses, illegal phone hacking, illegal mobile voice interception took place. That does not bode well for trust. And I'm sure there will be many people in Sky in the Middle East who are having to work even harder over the coming months, because trust really matters in the Middle East.
Are we witnessing the dissolution, the beginning of the end of family-based conglomerates? Can you have huge multinationals run by families with modern corporate governance rules and sharp-eyed investment funds on the case? Is this the end of the family mega business, perhaps?
It's a very, very important question, but actually you might be surprised, because I don't feel that it is, because I think that James Murdoch actually deserves the positions he has on merit. He went through some very serious processes of training and appraisal before he occupied the senior positions that he now does occupy. And I think families, successful families, will always look to see if they have talent within because of the trust factor. And I think the importance of the family in the Middle East means that we have not seen the end of family businesses and family-run businesses, but what we are seeing is a realisation that whether you're family or not, you cannot avoid scrutiny and transparency.
Kevin, great to talk to you. Many thanks indeed. Coming up here on Counting the Cost, an apple a day. Make that many, many apples a day. Not only keeps the doctor away, but keeps the accountants very happy at the world's biggest tech company. Now to the deal done to stop Greece defaulting on its massive debt. But is the second bailout package agreed in Brussels enough to stop the euro from sinking too? Our correspondent Jonah Hull watched the details of the deal emerge.
Described as a make-or-break summit for the euro, leaders of the Eurozone gathered at the Last Chance saloon. At stake, not just the fate of the Greek economy, but others too, with financial market uncertainty impacting on far larger economies like Italy and Spain, threatening the future even of the euro itself. In the end, there was a deal.
When European leaders say that we will do everything what is required to save the Eurozone, it is very simple. We mean it.
There was agreement on the size and terms of a fresh bailout for Greece and a bold plan to strengthen the European Financial Stability Facility, Europe's rescue fund. Loans will be more readily available on far more affordable terms. Marshall Plan-style funds will help rebuild broken economies like Greece, Ireland and Portugal. Europe, it's hoped, will have the tools to deal with future instability.
We now have a program and a package of decisions which create a sustainable path for Greece, a sustainable debt management for Greece.
The financial markets have reacted positively. Eurozone leaders have spent long hours searching for unity and clarity of action here. They had to convince international markets of the Euro Club's ability to deal not just with Greece's problems, but those of other indebted nations as well. National parliaments will have to have a say on some of the new measures announced, but for now they seem to have succeeded. The agreement includes a plan to encourage private investors, mainly banks, to incur voluntary losses on their loans to Greece. A significant change in policy that will help reduce the debt burden. but it may yet be viewed as a partial Greek default, and it remains unclear how investors will react. A default in Greece, they may fear, could be followed by much bigger defaults and therefore losses elsewhere, which could yet prove deeply unsettling.
Now, any company which has $76 billion in the bank is sitting pretty. That company is Apple, and these are selling like hotcakes. More than 20 million iPhones alone in the third quarter. Apple is now leapfrogging Nokia and Samsung to become the world's biggest smartphone maker. And it's on course to become the most valuable company on the planet, surpassing oil giant ExxonMobil. Overall, Apple sold some $28 billion worth of tech stuff that sent profits rocketing 125% to a new record high of more than $7 billion. Apple shares are now worth more than $400 each, which is a bit of a sore point for independent technology journalist Kevin Anderson.
Adrian, I can remember when Apple stock was at 13. Now, I bought it at 25. Unfortunately, I sold it long ago. And what's really interesting about this is just a few years back, Apple actually dropped computer from its name. So before it was Apple Computer Incorporated, now it's just Apple. And that was a recognition that it was really moving away from that core computer business to selling other things. And at the time, it was more iPods and iPhones, and now, of course, it's the iPad. And this one thing to note is they actually would have sold more iPads if they could have made them faster this quarter.
Wow. So why is the company doing so well? This, of course, all happening as the guy who's credited with much of Apple's success, Steve Jobs, is on sick leave.
Well, I think it's part of a broader economic trend, and part of this, I think, is down to the fact that in this recession, and I think a lot of countries are still either feeling the after effects or consumers would still say they're in a recession, luxury products are still doing quite good. And if you think about it, Apple really is the BMW, Porsche, Louis Vuitton of technology. And I think that that's one thing that has set them apart from some of the other sort of plain brown wrapper technology companies around the world.
Is it fair to say that Apple has now blown Microsoft out of the water? I mean, other companies and competitors aren't going to sit idly by while Apple climbs this mountain of success.
Well, it's a complicated picture because, I mean, if you look at the figures, Apple's sales of computers, which is where it most directly competes with Microsoft, were only up a very, very small percentage. The company blamed that on the fact that today it released a new operating system and people might have been delaying that computer purchase. So in terms of Microsoft's dominance on computers, Microsoft is still incredibly dominant. But when it comes to mobile phones, Microsoft is not even in the running. They're sort of only about 7% market share in the US, for instance. So they've really struggled to move into mobile phones. And to put it, in terms of Google, they actually outsell Apple in terms of handsets, but that Google doesn't make money from selling Android. It makes money from ads it sells on the Android handsets. So it's still a complicated picture, but in terms of money, absolutely. I mean, to put this in perspective, now Apple is sitting on a $76 billion mountain of cash.
And from one American icon with a rosy future to another heading for a museum.
Thank you, Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Endeavour, and our ship Atlantis. Thank you for protecting us and bringing this program to such a fitting end.
The shuttle Atlantis and its 4 astronauts came home safely for the final time on Thursday, 42 years to the day after Neil Armstrong took his giant leap for mankind on the moon. The last ever shuttle landing ends a 30-year-long space adventure, which has cost around $200 billion. The end of the shuttle era, a tearful moment for NASA veterans.
That is, for me, very emotional. What has happened to the shuttle program, where we're going in the future. And of course, right now, there's a lot of questions on where we are going with the future. But I can tell you one thing, when Charlie Bolden announced that Atlantis was going to stay at Kennedy Space Center, my heart was just beating, So, that it will be here at Kennedy as a museum piece that people are going to have access to. So I'm going to go over and see her in a little while, and, it's like one of the family. When you live with something 7 days a week for 13 years, which is what it is, days, nights, and weekends in some cases, and sit in the firing room, watch her lift off. I mean, just the excitement of the moment, and then to see her come back home today, It was night when it came home, but this morning when it arrived on the landing strip, and just to hear her come by, and the APUs are running, you know, it's screaming actually, and she comes with the parachute out, come to a standing stop on the runway, and you say, wow, what a program, what history, what a ride.
Well, as the shuttle becomes history, thousands of space industry workers are losing their jobs. To the dismay of its critics, NASA is no longer able to put an American into space on a rocket made in America, and it'll be some time before private companies can take over. As our man at Cape Kennedy, Scott Heidler, explains.
Absolutely. When Atlantis's wheels stopped on runway 15, the space shuttle program came to a halt, and really the icon, the public connection for NASA, for the American Space Administration to the public. So they've lost that, and they really haven't announced what their next big project is going to be. So there's uncertainty on that front, but something that is happening, and here in Florida, around the Cape Canaveral area, commercial spaceflight is really kind of taking off now. NASA has said that they're going to rely on commercial rockets to bring supplies and astronauts up to the International Space Station. We have spoken with some executives at some of these companies, and they're looking to really expand that industry here in Florida, because you have this this very talented workforce that's being laid off from NASA because the space shuttle program's coming to an end. So they're looking to tap that knowledge, but we're in this period where there's going to be a bit of a gap, if you will, before that commercial space flight really starts, after we've seen the end of the space shuttle program when Atlantis landed today.
So, Scott, now Americans are going to have to rely on the Russians to get into space, hitching a ride. It's not cheap. Russia's announced that it's going to increase the fee that it charges the Americans from $56 to $63 million for each astronaut that the U.S. wants to put into space.
It's definitely not a cheap ride. Yeah, those Soyuz tickets, seats, if you will, have just increased. And that is the only way right now that American astronauts and supplies are going to be able to get up to the International Space Station. So the Russians, for the time being, have a corner on the market. What's going to happen, hopefully, in maybe the next 2-3 years, some of these commercial spaceflight companies are going to be able to start taking up American astronauts to the space station. One that we spoke with, the executives we spoke with at SpaceX, it's a California-based commercial spaceflight company, they say that they're going to be able to do it for $20 million a seat. But that's not right around the corner. That's a couple years down the line, because they still have some testing that they need to do. But in the meantime, they're saying that probably by the end of the year, they're going to be able to start cargo runs to the International Space Station. But for right now, the Russians will have the ticket corner on the market for the tickets for astronauts going up to the space station. One thing we know around the corner, it's not going to be as heavy lifting like that is going to be available, but there will be some of these commercial spaceflight companies are putting, one in particular is putting a trunk on the end of a capsule that'll house people. The trunk will be able to carry up some material. But overall, if you look back at the 30 years of the space shuttle program, it did what it said they set out to do, and that is provide, and it was even nicknamed a bus, to go up to the International Space Station. That is no longer there, but hopefully they'll be able to quickly replace it with these capsules. But again, it grossly overcost expenditures skyrocketed for the space shuttle program, because they had to keep adapting it to fit different needs, and quite frankly to appease a lot of people, because the money has to be appropriated through Congress, and once you have that bureaucracy involved, and we've talked to former NASA astronauts about that, that's when they feel, a lot of them feel, that the shuttle program went off track because you had too many hands in the pie, if you will.
And that's about your lot for this week, but there's always Counting the Cost online, where we put up all our shows for you to watch again at your convenience. You get there from the main page at aljazeera.net/English by hitting the business tab at the top and linking onto the Counting the Cost page. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan, in for Kamal Santamaria this week. Stay with us on Al Jazeera now for the latest news headlines.